Hey, everybody, it's Mimi from Be Heard, Empower Yourself. And as usual, I like to keep my show varied with all kinds of topics. As my loyal listeners know, I can have anything on from the Akashic Records to spiritual beings to marketing, so I try to cover it all. But it makes it fun. Makes it fun for me, and I hope it makes it fun for you. So today I have Candace Klein. Hi, Candace. How are you?
Hello, I'm good, Mimi. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
And Candace has just recently changed her name, and I can relate to that because when I wrote my first book, I wrote it under my maiden name, which was Tallow, and my first name is Marie, but I put Mimi because
Mm.
Mimi was the name I always wanted. What better time, you know?
hmm
So, and that's a cute little thing in common. So, Candace is a proven leader with significant experience in fundraising and business development and marketing. And in my crew, I have one part of my podcast and my YouTube show that we sometimes focus on business development and marketing because I have a lot of authors, a lot of writers that follow me.
hmm
Makes sense. And Candace, you have previously managed Boston Breakthrough Academy, hmm, an
That's
emotional
right.
intelligence leadership training academy. Never heard of that. Sounds interesting. Emotional intelligence. Okay. And in
hmm
2012, you co-authored the legislation that became the Jobs Act. Well, that's very impressive. And you recently published your first book, Typhoon Honey, The Only Way Out Is Through. I like that title. I like
And
that.
that was an emotional intelligence based book. So yeah, tied to my leadership academy.
I love it because I'm with my husband 40 years, but he's my third husband.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So I like that the only way out is through. No, it's like I'm such a good wife, they don't want to let me go. Fight my way to get away from them.
hmm
So anyway, you're a perfect fit for our show because I could tell you the sense of humor because you're laughing at my jokes. So anyway, many leaders talk about breaking open moments. You're talking about breaking through. So, what was one moment that fundamentally shifted how you see yourself?
Well, a few of them, and the only thing I would just thank you so much, by the way, Mimi, for having me on your show. And more recently, I have just published a book called Polyagony, which is all about repair in open relationships. And so we're
Oh, yeah.
adding to the book repertoire. But you asked about breakthrough moments. In order to tell a breakthrough moment, I think you have to start with a breakdown. And so I'll tell the story about what caused me to write this most recent book. So I have been in an open marriage my entire marriage. I've been married 11 years. I have a 7-year-old son. Very happy. They were literally just in here with me and you a couple of minutes ago. And so we've just had a non-traditional way of living that has worked really well for our family. As you mentioned, I used to run a leadership academy called Boston Breakthrough Academy, and two of my adult students, I graduated 1,000 adults through that leadership academy, all mid to high level executives.
Mm.
And two of the people who came through my leadership academy were husband and wife. And there was a severe domestic violence situation among this couple, and the wife did not survive. It was a just severe domestic violence situation. And there were 3 children involved. They had 3 kids under the age of 6. And at the time, this was a couple of years ago, the attorneys for the children reached out to my husband and I and asked us if we would fight for custody of the kids because they didn't feel they were safe. And we did. We went to court and we fought for custody of these kids. And the judge ultimately ruled against us because we're in an open marriage. We had social workers and adoption agencies all talk about how amazing and loving our family is, how well-rounded our child is, how, communicative we are, and like what a safe place this would be. And the judge ultimately ruled against us because we're polyamorous. And in that moment, you can go in one of two directions. You can choose to just go do what the courts say to do, go back and do things the way everybody else does them, or you can be an advocate. And I have chosen to be an advocate for non-traditional family structures. And that's why I wrote my most recent book.
You hit on the head for me. You have to hit like sort of a bottom or sort of a situation where you feel you're stuck. You can't go anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
And with the three marriages, the first one I would say I was too young. Okay.
Hmm.
Normal reasons to get divorced. He was bad, only stayed now a year and a half.
Yeah.
But the second marriage was very sick. It was out of a movie because when I divorced him, he would not recognize a divorce.
Mm.
And he stalked me and he was
Mm.
physically abusive. He didn't pay child support. He didn't care if
Hmm.
I starved. He would show up on a date. Now, I'm a divorced woman. I am
Hmm.
divorced. Okay.
Yeah.
And he would show up and he would intimidate me and my date. So I never got a second date, of course.
Hmm.
Who wants to date me with this guy? And I mean, I was at the point of murder. And I don't say that lightly. He had stalked me and waited for me to come home. I had been on a date. My kids were with my parents. He jumped out of the bushes and it was horrible. And when I called the police, now you have to realize this is 1977,
Hmm.
and they really didn't care about women getting abused by their husbands. Really.
Hmm.
And a lot of women were dying. And this police officer came, and of course, the ex was gone. And when I told him what happened, he literally said to me, "Go buy a gun.
Mm.
Next time it happens, shoot the bastard." I'm not making this up. It's in my book, my first book, Raised by
Hmm.
Wolves, Not by Demons. And then he said to me, "And if it happens outside the apartment, after you shoot him, drag him inside." This is a
Mm.
police officer telling me to do this, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
So I had to do extreme things to get him away from that man. I really did.
Hmm.
So I understand that. And then fast forward to when I was 41 and I had this wonderful husband that I'm with like 40 years. I hit a bottom emotionally, spiritually, physically, and realized I had something wrong, but I didn't know what it was, and found out it was alcoholism.
Mm.
Because all those years of trauma from my parents to the two exes and having chronic depression and not knowing it, I was
Hmm.
self-medicating.
Hmm.
I was my own doctor. I was like, hey, some vodka on ice, that'll calm me down.
Yeah.
That'll fix everything. And I'm sober 35 years in May.
Congratulations.
Again, crisis, 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 nowhere else to go, feeling like you're in a corner, but that I will say that doesn't happen for everybody.
Hmm.
Thought about that the other day, that some women might be in the corner crying and not know what to do. And some women, I'm talking women,
Hmm. Hmm.
that's my main subject usually. If they just pull their pants up and get that resilience and get up and fight physically, emotionally, whatever they have to do is fight. And that's what we're talking about. But you have to get at a light bulb moment.
Hmm.
Like, I'm not going to get out of this. Nothing's going to change unless I do something drastic.
That's
Right?
right. That's
Okay.
right.
I could tell by your face you agree with it all.
Yeah, I mean, and that's actually, I mean, that's the whole reason why I told you about the turning point moment with that court case, because, most people would have just chosen to say, oh, you know what, the judge has a good point. Let me just go back and be monogamous. But for me, and something I talk about in polyagony is that many people identify, it's like LGBTQ, right? People identify as polyamorous. I do. It's a part of my identity and who I am. And so it was like, this is the wrong answer. This is the wrong answer. The courts ruled incorrectly in this instance. And I'm an attorney, I'm a licensed attorney. And I was like, if I've changed federal laws before, like you mentioned, the Jobs Act. And so it's like, okay, if I want to see this changed, I have to do it myself.
But the
And
focus
so,
should have been on the children. The
yeah.
focus should have been on the children, and he made it.
And on what was the best, because these children are now in foster care. They're now in foster care and they're in a much unhealthier environment. And so the point of all of this is non-traditional family structures are much more common today.
Yes.
So when 70% of marriages end in divorce, when 20% of the American adult public now identifies as non-monogamous, and it's a fast-growing subculture, there
Mhm.
are so many different ways that a family can look now. You have sperm donors who aren't active in a child's life, but you have, single parents who are very strong. And like the fact that we are now still courts are forcing families to look a certain way, that is what needs to change.
Yeah, I have had on a transgender woman. I have
Hmm.
a woman that identifies as neurodiverse. Uh,
Hmm.
I've had men on the show too, don't get me
Sure.
wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Women are usually more interesting. But anyway, I don't want to seem sexist, so I have a few men. But yeah, I, in my younger days, very open-minded, still open-minded, and I didn't care what color, race, sex you were or identified as
Sure.
anything. But it was in the 60s, and some people did care, you know.
Mm.
So I had to deal with a lot of hiding friendships, you know.
Mm.
Couldn't let,
Hmm.
couldn't let my father know that I was on a date with a black man. Oh no.
Mm.
Uh, one ex-husband like full rage because I was sitting with a transvestite who was in full drag and we went to the ladies' room together.
Hmm.
But nothing of it. Nothing. It didn't even dawn on me. Nothing came in my mind about that. Which,
Yeah.
you know, so I've always been like that. And now I see after all the fighting for equality, for color, for sex,
Hmm.
for everything, women. God,
Hmm.
bless you.
Thank you.
And women especially. Oh my God, they're
Hmm.
taking away our rights. And you're a lawyer. Doe versus Wade, is that I say it?
Roe. Yeah. Roe versus Wade.
I always say it wrong. Always. Oh my God, I fought for that. That was
Hmm.
60s and 70s, and they overturned it. I'm like, whoa, what's going on? Handmaid's Tale. I'm like
Hmm.
really nervous.
Yeah.
But so I'm glad to hear you have all those credentials and that you're trying to resist. So let me ask you this. Ask you about internet resistance. And you had to overcome that somehow. Did I read you have had to?
Yeah, so in Polyagony, which is a trilogy, there's three books in the series. There's the foundation, the expansion, and the reckoning. So if you're, in an existing marriage and you're wanting to open it up, there's like, what do we need to think about? And then there's the expansion, like actually going on a date with another person. And then
Mhm,
there's, how do I talk about this with my friends and family? And then the
mhm,
reckoning is all about like all the things that can go wrong, like all the
mhm,
sideways, like the paper cuts in the relationship and breaking up and all of that. But in the expansion, in that second book, we talk about coming out of the closet. And I just recently, I've been polyamorous now for almost 20 years. I
mhm.
just came out of the closet this past September,
Ooh,
um, publicly as a bisexual, queer, polyamorous woman, and there was significant backlash. So
I mean,
from family, from people I hadn't seen in 20 years, who felt the need to tell me that God was frowning on me, and it was like this is who I am. I have been in the closet for. I'm 45 years old for 45 years, and I'm
mm,
finally feeling like this is the time for me to just be who I am publicly. So, what I talk about in the book is one, really think about how you want to come out if you're wanting to come out of the closet. with whom, with which populations. There's like, really sheltering coming out of the closet with just the people who will be supportive. You have to think about if you're going to come out to your children, that's a different set of conversations. And then if you want to come out with social media, and that's a completely different
Oh,
conversation.
yeah.
So every step, I've gone through all the steps and just did like the big coming out of the closet in September. But I write about like things you need to think about and considerations that should be taken into account.
Yeah. I grew up in a home, again, 50s and 60s was my childhood and teenage years. And back then it was whatever happens in this house stays in this house. You
Mm-hmm.
don't talk about anything. And my father was an alcoholic,
Mm-hmm.
and my mother was a narcissist. Like
Mm-hmm.
I cannot remember one time that she hugged or kissed us. And if we
Yeah.
hugged or kissed us, she kind of took it for a second, like it was awful. And then plus just, and there were a lot of other things. But I grew up like that. And then I came into a little bit more freedom when I left home. And it was the 60s and 70s. So I had a lot of fun, sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Mm-hmm.
Made the mistake of getting married and ended all that. But
Mm-hmm.
I told you 2020, it was really hard on me with the husband. I was a caretaker, my own health problems. I have an autoimmune, I have breast cancer, I have a few things.
Mm-hmm.
I was told I have chronic depression. I've been on antidepressants for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I was getting depressed because I was being mean to my husband. And
Mm-hmm.
and I'm very aware of, I have self-awareness. I do.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have very good self-awareness. Not all the time, but most of the time. So I got into my help and everything. And my counselor advised me to write a book. And I said, I'm not a writer. And she said, you told me you wanted to be an English teacher when you were young, and your parents stopped you from that, from going to college, which, by the way, I ended up going to college with two little kids and no child.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a
You go,
woman.
girl. You go,
That's a
girl.
woman. And him coming on campus is a mess. So anyway, long story short, I said, "Oh, you're right." So I know vocabulary and grammar, and I have the story because it's my story, and I wrote this book. The backlash from this book, and I did not come out as a queer or bisexual or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Just the fact that I put everything that happened in my life out for the world to see. My husband's family, Catholic, Irish, very strict, very provincial. We're,
Mm-hmm.
we're furious. We're
Mm-hmm.
furious. And some of them still are. And that amazes me. I mean, it's my story. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I made a point of, they were in the background. My children were in the background.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't their story, and I wasn't going to
Yep.
fix them. Yeah. And I
Yep.
did a very good job. And I didn't make sex too explicit. I
Right.
made it like a 1940s movie where the light went off and the door
Mm-hmm.
closed. But I'm just saying, it's like, who are they to judge? I always think of the Bible. I'm not a big Bible person, but I do think of cast the first stone. Do you
Mm-hmm.
know that quotation?
Yep.
Who is without sin, let you cast the first stone. So you, honey, they have no right, because there's nobody I know that doesn't have some sin or black spot on their life. Am I right?
Yep.
Right.
That's right.
So I totally relate to you in a different way, different circumstance, but it's kind of the same. And one last thing I will say too, they're harder on women. They're hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now the gays are having a real hard time. My friends that are gay are having a real hard time because they're taking away, some of the states are taking away the right to marry, which they just gave them a few years ago, and now they're taking it back. The
Yeah.
women that could get the abortion, I mean, it's pretty clear what's going on. And who's doing it? White men. And I say white men. And
It's interesting to hear you talk about this because I was in a conversation recently with a family member who didn't understand why I'm writing this book. I'm doing a TED Talk in September on this topic, and so I'm very passionate about it. And they were like, I just don't get when the world is how it is right now, why you're so focused on this frivolous stuff. And my response was, this is the way I'm creating safety in the world. I'm creating a conversation. I'm creating a broader conversation around the ways that we love each other. And the whole point of this is to make more people feel safe, particularly when we're in a world right now where so many of us feel unsafe. And like, this is just my small way of making an impact. And that helps the person to understand. And we reached a better understanding as a result of the conversation. But when the rest of the world makes no sense, all that you or I or anyone who's listening to this podcast can do is to say, how can I make my small stake in the sand? Like you did when you were dealing with depression and wrote your book, or like I did as I'm dealing with this court decision and writing mine. It's out of our pain, we create healing. And so my goal here, just as yours I'm sure was, is to create healing for the world through the pain that I've experienced.
and you're not being passive. You're being assertive.
Hmm.
You're
That's
not
right.
being passive and eating what they want you to eat and swallowing it. You're saying, well, no,
Hmm.
I don't believe that. I don't agree with
Hmm.
that. And I'm only one tiny little person, but I could do something. And very exciting. I'm very proud of this. That book was published in 2021, and I'm still getting checks,
That's
royalties.
awesome. Congratulations.
It is. I mean, I'm talking $20 maybe, but I know lots of people that wrote books and didn't sell one
Hmm.
because they didn't know how to market. I taught myself how to publish, market, do all of that. I'm
Hmm.
real deep into the whole algorithm thing, which is like blows my mind. And my friends are like, how are you doing this? You're this age, and how I can't even use my phone. And I
Hmm.
said, because I'm teaching myself. You could be any
Hmm.
age and teach yourself. You could be 80 and teach yourself how to do this. But
Hmm.
it's also about having a voice. Don't take my voice away. And
Hmm.
you feel the same way. And that's what
Hmm.
you're doing your whatever it is, no matter how small or big. This I have to tell you. Last month, I had on my show a man. His last name was Cunningham, David Cunningham. And he wrote a book about leaving a love footprint. Because we always talk about environmental issues and what
Hmm.
footprint we're leaving.
Hmm.
He is gay and has a gay husband. And he wrote this book about leaving a love footprint. He self published, he got a whole bunch printed up for him, and he sent one to every member of Congress,
Hmm.
including the president and vice president. And I said, did anyone call you back? And he said, two senators called him. I said, well, that's two more than nothing. And now he's going to Washington and he's going to go to each and every office. Now, some people might say, he's crazy. What is he wasting his time? You and I don't think he's crazy, do we?
Well, no, as somebody I was a lobbyist for about 15 years and worked on federal and state legislation. It's all human connection. So good for him.
Good
And
for
also that's also like what I'm doing with polyagony and my TED Talk is I'm creating a different conversation. So he's just creating a new conversation as am I. And honestly, right now with the world being what it is, the world could use more love,
Oh, yes.
period. Right.
Yes.
And so like with polyagony, what my goal is to create more love. We can that like I wholeheartedly do not believe in love scarcity, meaning and like you have children, so you understand this. Like
Yeah.
even if as people who are monogamous, and I write about this in my book, I say if you're monogamous, but you have more than one child, you
Yeah.
knew before you ever had a child, oh my gosh, I couldn't possibly love anyone more than I love my partner, my spouse. And then you
Mhm.
have a child and you're like, oh my God, my heart just expanded. And look, I just feel completely overwhelmed with love for my child. And then you have a second child, and then you're like, oh, I have more love. It's not like there's 100 units of love that have to be divided between your three people in your life. Love is abundant. Love is something that can be expanded, it can be grown, and it's something that can be shared much more freely. And that's really what I'm an advocate for with non-monogamy.
There are two books I read after I got sober. And to me, they're very important books. One was the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't care if you're an alcoholic or not, go read that book because it has life lessons in there. It
Mm-hmm.
really does. And then I read A Course in Miracles. And I don't know if you ever heard of A Course in
I
Miracles.
haven't. Mm-mm.
This woman was an
Mm-hmm.
atheist. And one day, I don't know how it came about that she was like a scientist. She was brilliant. She started writing and she wrote this book, but it wasn't her. Like she just says, it wasn't my thoughts. The paper went to pen, pen to paper. Well, I'm going to tell you what, that's another book. So along the road, some people read both books like I did and said, they have the same message. There's really only two emotions, love and fear.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot have love if you are afraid, and you cannot be afraid if you have love. Now, that
Yeah.
to me is very clear. And a lot of people have said that the two books have the same message, and they do. Now, the guy that wrote the first book, the AA book, he was an alcoholic and he was a stockbroker in New York, very successful, you know. And when he
Mm-hmm.
got sober, he was dragging drunks off the street trying to get them sober. It didn't work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We tried a different approach. And this woman was a scientist, an atheist, and now I'm not a holy roller. I'm not very religious, but some people would say, oh, it's like the hand of God wrote the book. I don't know. Her subconscious, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Freaky thing, but it came out to be very good. That's all that counts. But unusual things happen all the time in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I are the type of people that I think don't just walk by and don't pay attention. I think we look and say,
Mm-hmm.
huh, that's unusual. I wonder what that means.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you had that in mind, I could tell.
The thing that I look for in so I have a coaching business, I run retreats, I'm a corporate executive and I have many
Mhm.
employees, and what I'm always looking for is the shape of someone's heart. So what is it that would light them up? And I always joke with people that I'm the flashlight that you use to go find your own light switch. And so my goal is to help people find their own light switch, find the things that turn them on. Not necessarily romantically or sexually, just in life, right? That's always been my goal with my leadership academy. And so yeah, so I hope that we can all look beyond what we see on the surface and look for what lights each other up.
I think so too. And this is a great conversation, by the way. I love it because, I do this. I go totally off topic, but then it comes out to be better. So, so we did talk a little bit about spirituality
Hmm.
because I was just talking about where I am with that. And I was born Catholic. And I think anybody born into any organized religion is in trouble because, from the time you're born to the time you're like maybe in grammar school, like these people have complete mind control over you. And whatever
Hmm.
they say is gospel. Yes, I meant the pun. They say it, mommy and daddy, it must be true.
Hmm.
So I grew up Catholic. So everything the Catholic Church and my parents told me that was it. And when I got divorced the first time, they told me, oh, you got divorced. You can't get communion anymore. You can't go for Holy Communion. You can't get the sacred wafer. I was like, but I'm not the one that cheated. He cheated
Hmm.
on me. Adultery, thou shalt not, covet another man's woman. That's adultery. Why am I getting kicked out? I was so devastated. And
Hmm.
I went to this cathedral downtown, big church where nobody would know anybody. It's so big. And I went in the confessional box. I was like 22 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I told the priest that sin. He said, the heck with that. He said, you come to this church anytime you want, and you walk up to the railing and you receive Holy Communion. And if anybody that knows you sees you doing it and says anything, you tell them, come talk to Monsignor. I love that, because
Mm-hmm.
stood up to his own religion and said, no, that's wrong. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I bring that up because I had no religion. I had nothing. And that's part of why I fell into the self-medication of alcoholism because I had nothing. And
Mm-hmm.
when I got sober, had to get sober first, and AA was my religion for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very good at it. I was a sponsor. I had every leadership role in the agency that you could have. But then things happened. And then I found true spirituality. And it doesn't matter if you're worshiping Buddhism or whatever. I found what I feel is true spirituality. And again, guess what it is? Love. It's love. And the spiritual community I'm in is based on love, and
Mm-hmm.
nothing else. And it doesn't have a covenant or a list of rules or anything. And
Yeah.
so where are you with the spirituality?
Yeah, it's interesting that you asked this. I've been doing a number of interviews around the launch of polyagony, and the question of spirituality and religion comes up in every single interview, which is interesting. I wouldn't expect that, but I've had time to think about it. I do not consider myself religious because you're telling stories of your life. I'll tell a story of mine. When I was 20 years old, I was excommunicated from my church for sleeping with the pastor's son. Now, I was engaged to him. We were engaged to be married at the time. And so I was actually very proud of myself. They said, we want you to apologize, and repent for your sins in front of the church. And I was like, I'm proud of myself. I waited until I was engaged to be married. I'm 20 years old. Like, I'm proud of myself. And so I was voted out of the church. And so I wouldn't consider myself a church going person, but I do consider myself quite spiritual. And what I have learned is there was a time in 2013 that I went trekking in Nepal, and I hiked all day, trekked all day with a woman who was teaching me about her religion, and she was talking to me about how we've lived many lives. And she said, we always come back, and we come back, and our job is to learn a lesson or teach a lesson or both. And she said, if you meet someone, if you come into contact with someone and you feel like, wow, I feel a real connection with this person, you've met them before, you've met them in a previous life. And
Mhm.
your job now is to identify like what the lesson is for the two of you to learn from
Yes.
each other.
Yes.
And so, like, what I see and how I live my life, whether it's in my marriage or with raising my child, if it is how I relate it, as I wrote this book, I look at every person I meet is a lesson in from my past or for my future in all of the different lives that we will lead. So whether you believe in heaven or hell or whether that I do firmly believe in a higher power. I'm also 8 years sober from alcohol, so I absolutely believe in my higher power. And I believe that every person I come into contact with, there is a lesson. There's a lesson from my past or for my future that I am meant to learn. And I'm going to explore that lesson with each of them.
I never thought that we would have this much in common. Really,
Yeah. Yeah.
I just did my Akashic records with someone. They uh, went into it for me because I didn't know how to do it. And they
Uh-huh.
said I had 6 lives.
Mm-hmm.
The funny part, I did it on my podcast. She said, you want to do it live and everybody to hear? And I said, yes, because that's how I am.
Yeah.
Want it all out there. And she said, your first life was 200 AD and you were a female gladiator. That was it. I said, that you don't have to go any farther. I believe you. I believe I was a female gladiator in 200
Yeah.
BC. My God.
Yeah.
So we went into that and then we talked about spiritual guides. And, in the Catholic religion, they talk about having guardian angels.
Mm-hmm.
I say you have a guardian angel. So I said, spiritual guide, guardian angel. How much of a jump is that? You know,
Mm-hmm.
I can believe that, So like I'm very open to a lot of those things because I believe that you do come back. I
And also like I had a second son named August, and he only survived for 4 days. So he was born very early, 22 weeks. I'm grateful that we had the 4 days with him.
yeah,
This necklace that I wear represents him, this little moon. I say that my son Ivor is my sun, and August is my moon. But the point is, I had a mom coach who was helping me to raise my children the best I could, and she called me before I was pregnant, and before I knew I was pregnant. She called me and she said, "You're pregnant." And I said, "What?" And she said, "I just wanted to let you know you're pregnant." And she said, I want you to know that your son picked you because you're slutty. He picked you because you are so like flamboyant and so out loud and so out there. And
yeah,
so he was
yeah,
only with us for 4 days. It was such a powerful experience. But what's interesting is I feel his presence
yeah,
constantly. I feel him with me all the time. And I
yeah,
feel him like hugging me and being like, "Mom, you got this, you go." And so I believe not only do we have like past and present and future lives, but I also believe that our spirits are constantly around us. Like my son is definitely with me all the
yeah,
time.
because people talk about it all the time and they have their own versions of what they think. And I always say nobody actually knows what they think. But what I would like to believe is that, yeah, I'm going to be wandering around and looking down and seeing what my kids and grandkids are doing, or and maybe intervening at sometimes, like in the background. Yeah, I want to believe that. I don't want to believe that
Hmm.
turn to dust. And what you
Yeah.
believe is important because that puts your life in that direction. If you
Yeah.
want to be a very at 77 to have had two terrible marriages, an awful childhood, all these diseases and body parts I have no original parts, Candace.
Hmm.
They're either removed or replaced. I'm not kidding. In fact,
Hmm.
I just released a book, Anatomy of an Alien. It's about me because every
Yeah.
time I go to the doctor for anything, he'd say, "Oh, yeah, you have a hernia, but it's different. It's not like anything I've ever seen." So like
Hmm.
every time we leave a doctor, and that would happen every time. Every
Yeah.
time we never saw something like that. Or you're a little different, or your things in a little different place. And I'd leave and I'd say to my husband, I'm an alien. I'm an alien. And when they would go in to do surgery, same thing. So I wrote that book, and you're going to like this. It's a medical paranormal mystery because what it does is all my medical stuff, but it also talks about star seeds. I don't know if you know about
Yep.
star. Oh, I
Yep.
love you. Oh, we were
Yep.
supposed to meet.
I pull star seed cards every day. Yep.
There you go. Am I a star seed? Here's some of the things that I went through that star seeds have this happen to them too. So that's the paranormal. The medical is all the stuff that's happened to me. I have
Mhm.
pictures in the book of all my surgeries. It's about
Yep.
30, about 30. And the mystery at the end is, am I a star seed?
Hmm. Neat. Well, two things that you just said that I think are important for your listeners, particularly as we're talking about like the topic of the, yeah. So there's a book called Stranger from a Strange Land. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but
No.
okay, so it's a fiction book, and it was written in the 80s, but it's about an alien named Valentine who comes to planet Earth and essentially is here to like teach us Earthlings about ourselves.
That's
He ends up being outcasted, and it's just an interesting book. But the thing that he's outcasted for is for teaching the topic of free love, and
oh
it's just
my
like the
God.
tree hugging hippie perspective. But you'll get a kick out of it because of the book you've written, because of the book I've written. It
Oh,
it
we
just
have
it,
to do another show. We have to do another
yeah.
episode because
The
we
sec
so
yeah,
much.
the second thing that you mentioned that I think is really important for your listeners, you've mentioned this a few times about your childhood and your marriages. And this is something I spend a lot of time talking about in the foundation of my book, Polyagony. And that is jealousy, FOMO, insecurity, none of it actually has to do with your partner. It all has to do with your own attachment wounds from your childhood. And so, if we could actually take the time to understand what happened, what went wrong in our childhood with an alcoholic father and a narcissistic mother, or with parents who were divorced, in my instance, or with abuse or molestation or anything else that you're dealing with from your childhood, that is going to keep showing up and repeating itself over and over and
Well,
over in your romantic relationships later in life, unless you can go back to the source and heal those wounds from your childhood. And so I'm even teaching a workshop this Wednesday night on attachment healing for that reason, because I think as adults, we focus so little on actually healing our wounds from childhood, which
yeah.
could help us so much with the relationships that we have today.
I have been doing counseling since I got sober. I have been
Hmm.
in group counseling, individual, inpatient.
Yeah.
I actually went away 3 times. One was, of course, to get sober. The second one was because I gained 50 pounds.
Hmm.
And so when you stop drinking, then you pick up the sugar. And the
Yeah.
third was family of origin issues. And
Hmm.
second one, my husband said, "Are you going to be going away every couple of years?" And I said, "If I have to,"
Hmm.
because what you just said is what I had to work on. I had to go way
Yep.
back. And the first book I wrote, a lot of people on my side of the family did not like what I said about my mother. And my mother tried to abort me. And
Oh, wow.
she wrote that down in a journal that she knew I was going to inherit after she died.
Wow.
So in my last book, I think that's when the star seed entered my body and saved my life.
Yeah.
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 And I can believe anything I want. And you can
Well, I believe that I am a star seed and that I am on this
walk
planet
it.
to do good in the world. And I also believe that my son is a star seed as well.
That's what
And
we're here for. To do
yeah,
good
that's what we're here for,
and
to
to
leave the world in a better place than we found it,
teach
to
other
heal
children.
hearts, to bring
Oh,
people together. Yeah. Yeah. And I honor you, Mimi, for doing this
thank you.
podcast and for continuing to write your books. I honor you as a woman who's been a trailblazer and someone who's kind of led the way for me and the next generation to follow in your footsteps, and
Thank
for
you.
continuing to have these open conversations on different perspectives and different walks of life, because I think that's where the true healing lives, it lives right now in this world, is where we can love
Okay,
each other even if we don't understand each other.
before we leave each other for the moment, because you're never going to leave me, I'm going to feel you.
We've met each other in a previous life for
We
sure.
are some best friends. We were besties.
Mhm.
One is, where can I find the TED Talk? Like, I don't do TED
Yes,
Talk.
everything about Candace you can find at
Okay.
polyagony.com.
All right.
So polyagony.com, and that will be my workshops, my free workshops, my retreats, the book, the TED
Spell
Talk. It's
that
all in one
slower.
place.
Spell that a little.
polyagony, polyagony.com. Yes.
And then the other thing was I going to ask her? No, I was going to ask her something else and I forgot. Okay. I'm going to, do you have you have a website?
It's polyagony.com. So that
Oh,
everything
that is
is,
your
yeah,
website. So
that's the
the
website.
TED Talk will be on your website.
It's all, yep, it's all there.
Okay. And
Yep.
your books are on Amazon?
They are, and you can go to polyagony.com to find all of them.
And with the name change, would I type in Candace Klein?
Klein, Klein, that's right.
Okay.
I also have done a full YouTube reading of my book series. So if you'd rather listen, you can go to you can look up Candace Klein on YouTube and you can see a full reading of the book as well
I
there.
have all my podcasts are also on YouTube. And I
Yeah.
tell people when giving my card and everything, I said, look, you think I look good? Go watch me on YouTube. I don't know why, but I look even better.
Got to appreciate Zoom editing or something like
Well,
that.
this was wonderful. Thank you. And
Thank you,
I
Mimi.
hope you will consider coming back.
I would love to. I'd be honored
Because
to.
there were so many topics that came out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, everyone, you had to love this one. And if you didn't, something wrong with you because this was fabulous. All right. Thanks again, Candace. Have
Thank you,
a great
Mimi. Have a great weekend. Bye bye.